Hello everyone, and welcome to Infocus on UATV. Viktor Orbán has completely lost control. He sees Zelensky and Ukraine everywhere he looks. This Kremlin servant is terrified of losing power, because he knows the Hungarian people will soon demand accountability for trying to sell their country to Moscow for his own benefit. But Hungarians understand this perfectly. More and more of them are taking to the streets against Russian domination. Meanwhile, Ukraine is strengthening vital ties with the Middle East, where our hard-earned expertise in modern defense and security is in high demand. The latest polls and protests showing Orban's campaign collapsing just days before Hungary's elections, and how Ukraine is building strong, mutually beneficial partnerships across the Middle East. With only a week left until parliamentary elections in Hungary, Viktor Orbán's anti-Ukrainian hysteria is backfiring spectacularly. At his own rally, crowds chanted, "Russians go home," the same slogan Hungarians used 70 years ago against Soviet occupation. Opposition leader Peter Magyar calls the vote a clear referendum on Hungary's European future. Polls show his TISA party leading strongly, while Orbán desperately blames Ukraine and Brussels for everything. Watch how Hungarian voters are rejecting Kremlin influence and demanding real independence.
As Viktor Orbán speaks at a rally, people chant, "Russians, go home." The phrase carries deep symbolic meaning in Hungary. It was the same slogan Hungarians used 70 years ago when they demanded that the Soviet army leave the country after Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's government has turned Hungary's course by 180 degrees towards Russia, opposition TISA party leader Peter Magyar said in an interview with the Associated Press. According to him, the upcoming election will serve as a kind of referendum on the country's European future. At the same time, Magyar does not intend to cut ties with Moscow completely. The opposition leader promises what he calls a pragmatic approach.
Pragmatism means that we have no say in Russia's internal affairs, and they don't have any say in our affairs. We are both sovereign countries, and we respect each other, but we don't have to like each other. Peter Magyar, leader of Hungary's TISA party, in an interview with the Associated Press.
The Prime Minister is trying to win over Eurosceptics and politically disengaged voters. He claims the European Union is trying to drag Hungary into a war with Russia. He also blames Brussels for falling investment and economic stagnation. Orbán accuses Ukraine of what he describes as energy blackmail. He says Kyiv is to blame for the disruption of Russian oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline, while never mentioning that the real cause was Russia's attack on infrastructure. Moreover, Orbán is demanding that the EU lift sanctions on the aggressor state.
I demand that Brussels immediately suspend sanctions and restrictions on Russian energy, and we must reject plans to phase out investment in Russian energy in favor of switching to Brussels' more expensive and unaffordable energy policy.
Another group Orbán has traditionally relied on is public sector workers. Reuters previously reported that the government had handed out housing subsidies to civil servants.
This social sector, public servants, has always, in principle, largely voted for these government initiatives and boosted their ratings. Why? Because it is a dependent sphere, and on top of that, Orbán is able to spend more on it.
So far, however, none of these measures has helped the ruling party close the gap with the opposition TISA party. Most of Hungary's opposition forces have refused to take part in the election in order to maximize voter consolidation around TISA. As a result, the next parliament could effectively become a two-party legislature, experts say. Around half of decided voters are ready to back Peter Magyar's party. Around 40% support Orbán's Fidesz. These are the findings of a poll by the Publicis Institute. In addition, the opposition may be able to secure a majority at polling stations abroad.
Nearly 91,000 Hungarians have registered to vote at Hungary's foreign missions, almost 40% more than in 2022. This could become a serious asset for TISA in the final count, since the overwhelming majority of opposition votes so far have come from polling stations abroad, from a report by Telex.
Still, even if the opposition wins convincingly, analysts say rapid change should not be expected. Over 16 years in power, Viktor Orbán has brought the entire government hierarchy under his control, as well as Hungary's largest media groups. If defeated, the Fidesz leader could even provoke a government crisis and force a new election.
If balancing the books weren't hard enough, Orbán can make life even more difficult through one of his most lethal traps, the Budget Council. The body comprises 3 Fidesz loyalists, recently appointed for terms of between 6 and 12 years, who can veto the budget. Hungarian President Tamás Sulyok, who is close to Fidesz and will be in office until 2029, can call a snap election if the government can't adopt a budget. The Budget Council and the President can only be removed by a 2/3 parliamentary majority. From a report by Politico,
Orbán constantly highlights his friendship with U.S. President Donald Trump, and Washington supports the current Hungarian Prime Minister's candidacy. A visit by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance to Budapest is scheduled for April 7th, just a few days before the election. The press service of the Hungarian Prime Minister has announced that he will speak at a rally together with Viktor Orbán, reported by Andriy Dimitrenko, UATV News.
While some in Europe still cling to outdated dependencies, Ukraine is confidently building new partnerships where our real-world expertise is highly valued. During recent visits to the Middle East, we signed major defense cooperation agreements with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. Our proven solutions for protecting cities and infrastructure from massive drone and missile attacks are now helping shape security across the region. See how Ukraine is turning battlefield experience into long-term strategic advantage.
Egypt will no longer import grain from Russia's temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. This was announced by the president of Ukraine following his conversation with his Egyptian counterpart. The two leaders discussed the development of cooperation in military, trade, and diplomatic spheres.
Egypt will no longer accept grain exported by Russia from our temporarily occupied territories and is at the same time interested in increasing imports of Ukrainian grain. Thank you for this decision. The country is also ready to make efforts to achieve a just peace. We agreed that the foreign ministers will maintain contact. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Escalation in the Middle East could trigger not only an energy crisis, but also a food crisis. The blockade of Iran through the Strait of Hormuz has effectively halted fertilizer exports. Ukraine managed to overcome Russia's blockade of the Black Sea and ensure the operation of the grain corridor for food exports. Kyiv is now ready to share this experience with the countries of the Persian Gulf, President Volodymyr Zelensky assured.
I don't see for today possibilities how to unblock it by one country or another. It's only joint steps, to my mind. It's about Russia, which is blocking the food for other continents. I think the situation with the deficit is similar, but in our case, it was about agricultural sector mostly, and here it's about energy. So in any way, there was a crisis in African countries, a lot of them, because our agricultural products couldn't transport. So that's what I said to Middle East countries. My opinion and my experience, what we can do.
At the end of March, the president of Ukraine made a working visit to several Middle Eastern countries. An agreement on defense cooperation was signed with Saudi Arabia. Similar arrangements were reached with the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Kyiv plans to conclude 10 contracts for arms exports spanning 10 years. This is the most opportune moment to deepen defense cooperation, believes head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Kirilo Budanov.
The world is showing great interest in our expertise, in our drone defense technologies, and so on. There is demand for this, and we must take advantage of it. This window of opportunity will not last forever. Either we occupy our niche or someone else will. Kirilo Budanov, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, at a CEO Club Ukraine meeting.
Kyiv has shared with Middle Eastern countries its unique experience in protecting civilian populations and critical infrastructure from massive combined air attacks. This includes comprehensive solutions, from interceptors to the construction of full defense lines, software, and electronic warfare systems.
At the same time, a new model of cooperation is being formed, long-term 10-year agreements in the field of security and military technologies. These provide for joint technology development, investment, and mutual strengthening of capabilities. Cooperation in the Gulf region is mutually beneficial. We share practical experience of modern warfare while simultaneously developing our own capabilities, in particular in countering ballistic threats and ensuring energy resilience. From a statement by the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine on Facebook.
Volodymyr Zelensky stated that during the visit to the Middle East, agreements were reached on diesel fuel supplies to Ukraine for at least 1 year. According to experts, the potential for cooperation with the countries of the region extends far beyond the defense sector.
This really means markets for our agricultural products, opportunities to attract business and other financial resources from these countries for Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. It also includes energy, ports, and very important trade routes.
Strengthening ties with the Middle East makes Ukraine even more attractive to the European Union, analysts believe. Brussels is gaining a partner that is already building relations with a region where the EU itself seeks to increase its presence, reported by Andriy Dmitrenko, UATV News.
That's today's In Focus. Orban's desperate anti-Ukrainian campaign is crumbling as Hungarians openly reject Russian influence and demand a European future. At the same time, Ukraine continues to expand its global partnerships, sharing hard-earned defense expertise with key Middle Eastern countries and securing new opportunities for cooperation. Ukrainians stand strong, adapt quickly, and build the future on its own terms. Thank you for watching. If you value honest reporting from Ukraine, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with friends who appreciate real strength. Together, we keep winning. See you next time. Stay focused, stay unbreakable.